The lighthouse keeper, Thomas, had always found a certain solace in the rhythmic sweep of the light across the turbulent sea. His life on the isolated crag was a solitary one, punctuated only by the crashing waves and the occasional squawk of a passing seabird. He kept a meticulous logbook, a daily record of the weather, the passing ships, and his own mundane tasks, a way to anchor himself to the relentless march of time. But lately, the entries in his logbook had begun to feel disjointed. There would be gaps in his memory, hours, sometimes entire days, that were simply missing. He would find himself staring at a page filled with his familiar handwriting, detailing events he had no recollection of. At first, he dismissed it as simple forgetfulness, the natural consequence of his age and isolation. But the gaps grew wider, more frequent, and increasingly unsettling. He started finding things out of place in the lighthouse. Tools he didn't remember using left scattered on the floor, meals he didn't recall preparing sitting cold on the table. Once, he found a half-finished letter addressed to a woman named Eleanor, a name that held no resonance for him whatsoever. He racked his brain, trying to piece together the missing fragments of his life, but they remained stubbornly out of reach, lost in a fog of amnesia. The isolation, once a comfort, now began to feel oppressive, amplifying his growing sense of disorientation. He started talking to the seagulls, their cries the only response to his increasingly frantic questions about the missing pieces of his life. Was he losing his mind? Was the solitude finally taking its toll? Then came the contradictions. He would write in his logbook about repairing a specific section of the railing, only to find the railing still broken the next day. He would meticulously record the passing of a particular ship, only to find no corresponding entry in the official maritime logs when the supply ship arrived weeks later. His own memories, his own written record, seemed to be at odds with the reality around him. One particularly stormy night, as the waves crashed against the lighthouse with violent fury, Thomas awoke with a start, his heart pounding in his chest. He had no memory of falling asleep. He looked around the lamp room, his usual sanctuary, but something felt different. The massive lens, usually gleaming brightly, was coated in a layer of dust. Cobwebs clung to the intricate framework. It looked as if the light hadn't been lit in days, perhaps even weeks. Panic seized Thomas. He frantically checked the logbook. The last entry was from 3 days ago, detailing a severe storm and his efforts to keep the light burning. But he had no recollection of any of it. He couldn't remember the storm, couldn't remember writing the entry. Had he failed in his duty? Had ships been lost because of his lapse in memory? He rushed to the window, peering out into the raging storm. Through the driving rain and crashing waves, he saw something that made his blood run cold. Washed up on the rocks below was a small, battered sailboat, its mast broken, its sails torn to shreds. It looked eerily familiar. Driven by a sudden, terrifying premonition, Thomas stumbled down the winding stairs of the lighthouse, his heart pounding with a dread he couldn't explain. He braved the wind and rain, clambering over the slippery rocks towards the wreckage. As he got closer, he recognized the sailboat. It was his. Or at least, it looked exactly like the small sailboat he vaguely remembered owning years ago. He reached the battered hull and peered inside. Lying amidst the debris and seawater was a body. It was waterlogged and battered, but as Thomas looked closer, a horrifying realization dawned upon him. The face, though swollen and disfigured, bore a chilling resemblance to his own. He recoiled in horror, stumbling backward, his mind reeling. Who was that, and why did it look so much like him? He scrambled back to the lighthouse, his thoughts a chaotic jumble of fear and confusion. He rushed back to the logbook, his hands trembling as he flipped through the pages. He stopped at an entry from several months ago, written in his own familiar hand. "The solitude is becoming unbearable. I feel like I'm losing myself out here. Perhaps it's time for a change." He flipped further back to an entry from almost a year ago. "The storm was terrible last night. My little sailboat was caught in the squall. I fear it's lost for good. A part of me feels lost with it." He continued to flip through the pages, the entries becoming more and more disjointed, the handwriting occasionally wavering, the gaps in memory more pronounced. And then he found it an entry from just over a year ago, written in a shaky, almost illegible hand. "I can't take it anymore. The loneliness, the guilt, Eleanor, I can't live with what I've done." Below that entry was a single, chilling sentence, written in a different hand, a hand that was somehow both familiar and alien. He doesn't remember. He never does. Thomas stared at the logbook, his mind struggling to comprehend the horrifying implications of what he was reading. Eleanor, the name on the unfinished letter. Guilt. What had he done, and who was the other person writing in his logbook? He looked down at his own hands, gnarled and weathered by years of tending the light. They felt familiar, yet somehow distant. He looked around the lamp room, at the dusty lens and the cobwebs. Had he been up here recently? Or had it been days, weeks, even months since he last lit the lamp? A cold dread washed over Thomas as he finally understood. He wasn't just forgetting things. His memories were being replaced, erased and rewritten, and the other person in the logbook, the one who knew he wouldn't remember. He looked out at the storm-tossed sea, at the battered sailboat washed up on the rocks below. He looked down at his own hands, and then he looked up at the dusty, unlit lamp, the beacon that was supposed to guide ships safely through the night. A single, terrifying thought echoed in the empty chambers of his mind. He wasn't the lighthouse keeper. He was the one who had been lost at sea, and the person writing in the logbook, the one who kept forgetting. That was the real lighthouse keeper, the one he had replaced. The weight of his false identity pressed down on Thomas, a crushing burden that stole his breath and left him trembling uncontrollably. His knees buckled, and he sank to the dusty floor of the lamp room, the chilling truth echoing in the silence. He wasn't Thomas, the steadfast lighthouse keeper. He was a nameless survivor, his mind a fragile vessel filled with borrowed memories. The real Thomas, what had happened to him? Had he succumbed to the storm, his body lost to the unforgiving sea? And what of Eleanor, the woman mentioned in the unfinished letter? Was she waiting for a man who no longer existed? A sudden, violent gust of wind rattled the lighthouse, and through the grimy windows, Thomas saw the storm intensifying. The waves crashed against the rocks with renewed fury, and the darkness outside seemed to deepen, swallowing the last vestiges of twilight. Driven by a desperate sense of urgency, a flicker of the responsibility he had unknowingly assumed, Thomas stumbled to his feet. He looked at the massive lens, coated in dust and neglect. He didn't know the proper procedures, didn't remember the routines of maintaining the light. But instinct, a primal urge to act, propelled him forward. He had to try. He had to atone for the life he had unknowingly usurped. As he reached for the controls, his hand brushed against something cold and metallic hidden beneath a pile of old rags. It was a tarnished key, engraved with a single word, Eleanor. The weight of it in his hand was heavy with unspoken stories and a life he could no longer claim. The storm raged outside. The unlit lamp stood as a silent testament to his deception, and Thomas, the man with a borrowed past, knew he had to make a choice that would determine not only his fate, but the fate of those lost at sea.